Now, we all know that there has been a rise in the number of women turning to non-invasive treatments to keep themselves looking young and rejuvenated. But are the executive businessmen also becoming more aware of their appearance and how they age? Tonight, we're going to be looking at the growing trend of non-invasive treatments amongst men, as well as what they should be considering when it comes to this. So joining me in the studio today is Dr Xen Ludick. He's a GP with a special interest in aesthetic and anti-aging medicine and procedures, as well as Dr Nudrianna Negro, an aesthetic doctor. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
So I don't feel so bad now the men are going, it's going south for them.
It's about time, isn't it?
It's about time. It's always the women who have to fret about everything. So no, seriously, I mean, this is a growing trend from what I understand. The statistics are showing that more and more men are having aesthetic treatments done. Now, Dr. Ludick, what are they having done? I mean, that quite interests me. And is it different to what women are having done?
Giselle, it's a very interesting question. I think the first point that's really important is you need to understand that South Africa is a very conservative market. People don't jump towards these treatments like they actually did in Europe or in the USA 20, 30 years ago already. It's quite slow in growing.
As long as that.
Absolutely. So the men are even more conservative, and I think it's because of the taboo that runs around aesthetic medicine as well. But they're doing things very similar to the women probably of about 7, maybe 10 years ago in South Africa. So it's a very similar kind of treatment schedule. You know, it's still the Botoxes and the fillers and some lasers and quite a bit of weight loss. Because remember, it's about the professional appearance. And I think that's what it's about, and not looking strange, which is similar to what women are looking for. But maybe just a little bit less aggressive, although the women in South Africa aren't aggressive, if that makes sense. You know, still a conservative approach.
Yes, so I mean, I think we've all, you know, you watch some of these Hollywood movies and you wonder what happened there. But you don't see a lot of that in South Africa. And I think with men, what's so interesting is that you'd probably never guess, or am I right, that I think with men it is quite much more subtle than women? Or Loredana, do you have a different experience than that?
No, it is. Men tend to want a more natural, subtle look. But it's the approach of the men that's quite interesting. They're very practical, whereas a woman will come and say, I'm feeling a bit old, what should I do? A man will come in and say, line's gone, younger, less cross.
And it's take that away.
This line gone.
Okay.
And it's very much the looking cross in the workplace, wanting to have a little bit of that.
So sorry, looking cross.
Yes.
So explain that.
Absolutely. Because when you have a persistent frown and a frown at rest, you tend to look concerned. And this happens in people who are looking at computer screens a lot or who have very high pressure jobs. So they want to look cool, calm and collected.
Okay, so and they would do what for
and
that?
They have a lot of Botox.
Okay.
Because it gives them that competitive edge. We're in a stressful situation. They look relaxed. They might be stressed internally, but they look relaxed. It gives them that confidence boost.
So now we all think that they're doing yoga and meditating.
Absolutely, yeah.
Meanwhile.
Absolutely.
Okay. And that has that effect?
It does.
Okay. So Botox and fillers then obviously number one treatment. And I mean, does it take a long time? Does it take a lot of time out of their diaries? Is this a very quick procedure to do?
Those are very quick procedures. Those are the true lunchtime procedures, in and out and back to normal life, and the results are gradual over time. So it's not that they arrived at the office at 8 a.m. looking one way and by 5 p.m. they look totally different. It's gradual and it fits into their schedules, and it's something that men, when they start to do it, like to do it. And men don't see it as vanity, which is quite nice.
We believe, and I think most people understand, that if you're doing something and you're still looking natural, you're still looking like yourself, you know, you're just enhanced, or you're just rejuvenated.
Or you look relaxed, or you're just looking better.
Precisely, because remember, the male market also, exactly like you've mentioned, is they want a result, and they want it relatively quickly, but without the downtime. And the Botoxes and the fillers can give them that. They can pop in, have a treatment done, it gradually improves, takes about 2 to 3 weeks, and then they get this result. So it's not, they walk out and everyone goes, what on earth have you done? And they get the result they're looking for without having to come in 40 times. You know, and that's what they're really looking for, result driven.
I'm quite intrigued because I know men just don't look after their skins properly. I'm sorry, you know, I just look around. I mean, it's improving over time, and I think awareness, but you know, you always see jars in women's bathrooms, and the man might have a sunblock. How has that affected the way you treat the skin? I mean, are men's skins worse than women's at a similar age? I mean, do they have different skin types, and do they take the treatments differently? So do you get a better result from a woman than a man? Do you have to use double the amount?
Valid question. I think, once again, because the men, in my opinion, are lagging behind the women in certain respects, especially only starting looking into these things now, yes, to a man and a woman of similar age, the men's skin generally is more damaged than the ladies. And we're kind of seeing that with our newer generation coming in, our younger generation. You know, the skin of an average 25-year-old now is a lot better than the skin of a 25-year-old 20 years ago, because suddenly we're aware of sun exposure, we're aware of sun damage, these lights and other things. You know, so yes, the men's skins are a little bit behind, but it's not a massive gap. You know, and so to bridge that gap is not particularly difficult. So and remember, male generally is not going to take 40 creams and apply it. You know, they're practical. We're practical. Sorry, we're practical beings.
You're one of them.
I forgot about that.
Just
we are
remind you.
practical beings. So we like the easy way out that's going to give us the result.
Okay.
So yes, there is a difference, I feel. I don't know if you have a different opinion or.
Well, actually, I think men take instruction a little bit better. It's a bit of an indictment of us as women. But if you say to a man, these are the 6 creams that you must use, and 6 is an obscene number, it would never say 6. But if you were to say 6, they would use them. And they would send somebody in after 4 weeks to collect their next ones, and it goes like that. So you give a man a treatment schedule and he sticks to it. And generally, because men have more oily skins, they look better for longer.
Okay.
So whilst they're carrying the damage, you can actually make a huge difference to a man's skin quite minimally invasively. And they don't have the benefit of being able to cover with makeup. So when you make a difference, it has to be something that is sustainable and is natural.
So, I mean, I know we've spoken about the things that most people know about because it's the Hollywood thing, but lasers are quite interesting as well. I mean, that technology is so well advanced now in terms of what...
Incredible.
Again, you know, what would be typical for a man to consider if he was looking at a laser treatment? What works with men in terms of laser treatments? Maybe Xen, we can start with you on that.
I'm going to start off with something quite simple though, because when people hear laser, they've got an immediate idea of what they think we're talking about. And laser doesn't mean that there's any downtime involved. However, there could be. So it really depends on the person that's sitting in front of you. If, as rightly mentioned, you know, men do have more oily skins, therefore pores, large pores tend to be a problem in men younger than in women. So there are lasers that are completely non-invasive that they could do for the pores specifically, and that once again is a lunch hour procedure. Come in and do it and you walk out. However, then you have to repeat that process a few times. But if the sun damage and the collagen destruction and everything else is bad, then a mild laser is really not going to do it. And then you're looking at the more invasive lasers where downtime is involved. And there's quite a bit of planning around that with the male clients specifically, especially your executives. And I'm not saying that the female executives don't go through the same thing, I just want to be clear, but they have to plan it, because for a few days they cannot go to work. You know,
so just explain maybe what happens, because I think that... Oh, okay.
Dropping the ball.
Over to you.
Thanks.
What happens?
So the laser systems that we tend to use are the fractional laser systems. So over a treatment, you're treating a fraction of the skin. So they aren't the lasers of 20 years ago where you went under general anesthetic, ablated everything, and you lay in a darkened room for months. You treat a fraction of the skin, and according to the availability of your downtime.
So bits at a time.
Well, you're treating the whole surface,
Okay.
but the laser's breaking the surface up into a fraction. So you can treat from 5% to 60% of the skin in a treatment. So you need to know your patient. You need to say, I have 8 hours or I have 2 weeks, and you choose accordingly. And again, it's about the instant gratification of the testosterone. I blame it on the testosterone. And so men often want to go for a more aggressive procedure. They'll say, well, I'll take a week off of work and I'll catch up on some TV and some books because I want a much quicker result. So if you've got bad pores, acne scarring is a very big thing in men. People tend to take acne more seriously in their girl children, and they think that the boys can handle it, can grow out of it. But again, when you're in an environment where people are looking at you, acne scarring has an effect on one's psyche and one's confidence levels. So when you're dealing with acne scarring, you have to be more aggressive, and men tend to be more amenable to having the time off to do that.
Now, I'm always interested in the thing that it seems to be a phenomenon with men on their necks. This kind of sort of pigmentation that happens. What is that? And is that something that you can treat?
Absolutely. It's extremely common. You've got to remember we live in Africa, a lot of sun around. And men generally, or let's talk about the men 20 years ago, didn't always have hair that was going over their backs. So their necks are always
So they didn't have
exposed.
long hair, they had to have short hair.
I wasn't an adult yet in the 70s, but I know that there were some guys running around with long hair. But for the most part, men's hair has always been short. So a lot of sun exposure on the neck area. So most of that is sun damage. And you'll see it with some of your ladies as well that used to wear short hair or still do. But that's mainly sun damage. And the lasers are great for that. I mean, you can always use the lasers to treat that. There are alternatives. lasers, but you can always use the lasers for that. I also think, just to on that briefly, as you're seeing it in the men more for the same reason, we don't generally have long hair now. So even now, it's exposed. Where in the female environment, a lot of people have got long hair. So if there was hyperpigmentation or sun damage, you could easily hide it. So I think it's a two-way thing. Yeah.
And the age spots, I think that's the other bugbear. It's not just, I mean, that's a female problem too, but that is the giveaway for a person's age. How easy are those to treat?
Well, they're quite easy because there are many modalities. It's you can go all the way from the low-tech solutions like the liquid nitrogen through the photosensitizing creams, and those are usually the domains of more medical practices and dermatology practices. We're lucky to have dermatologists with us, so we offer all of those things. But then they'll come to us if they don't want that solution. You can always use a laser. And so you choose according to how many spots there are and the location of the spots. On the face, you'd probably use a laser because the risk with liquid nitrogen is that you lose pigment in the area. So in fact, what used to be a brown spot becomes a very white spot, not attractive. Yeah. And that's your face.
Especially if they've got a nice ready skin, all that sun damage.
Yeah. Whereas with
golf, cycling.
Exactly. Whereas with the hands and the neck, you can tolerate those things a little bit better.
Sure. We're running out of time, so I have one last question to each of you. I'm quite intrigued. I mean, what is the weirdest or the strangest thing a man has ever asked you to do in terms of a treatment? I have to start with the man first and let the lady finish.
I'm rather not going to go down that road, but I'm just going to incriminate myself. But what I will tell you is what I do find interesting is that often the girlfriends or the wives brings their husbands and boyfriends kicking and screaming. They don't want to be here. They've dragged them here. But when the follow-up appointment is booked, they pitch and the women aren't there. They're religious about returning and getting the results.
Absolutely.
I find it so funny. Initially, they're all up in arms, and then they become your best friends. So I find that quite interesting, but you're welcome to share.
Well, I obviously have a slightly more PC clientele, but my funniest was a middle-aged executive who came in with a totally dead straight face, said to me, "Make me look like George Clooney." And he outlasted me. I sort of, and he said, "No, I'm just kidding."
Is that the guy that I saw in Santon last week?
Yes. Didn't I do a good job?
So,
Brilliant.
Oh, well, that's great. Well, anyway, it's been great to have you in the studio. And I mean, we laughed a lot, but it's a really fascinating topic. And absolutely. I know many who are using that look fabulous. So there's one tip that we get out of this from today. It's that, yes, you can have the non-invasive treatment, but try right in the beginning, when you're young, to use sunscreen, because that might avoid or at least delay the process at which you have to start that. Thank you so much for joining us, not just tonight, but for every show we've had over the past year. Dr. Xen Ludick and myself have really loved to entertain you on your screens every night, and we've appreciated all the support and the tweets that we have received. This is our final goodbye to you, and we'd like to thank you for tuning in for your daily dose of health news. So from the team, all of us in CNBC studio, be well, stay wealthy and healthy, and good night.